Yeah, just one thing that I realized that I hadn't checked the other day is if I put the X sections on, and if you remember right at the beginning of this, I said that we wanted to, or I thought it would be a good idea to, if I bring in the glasshouse mesh, to sort of ignore the data in this area and try and get this side surface. Because what I didn't like about the data here is the fact that following the brown section there, that's the data, is that this surface comes back on itself. So it comes down here and then goes back in. And I didn't feel that was quite right. And Lardo said the same thing when I asked him about it, that it would be, I think it'd be more like, it should be more like this, where we've got a sort of, that's quite parallel to this section here. But if you look down here, obviously we haven't got a surface in here, but what I realize is that, you know, if I offset this surface, then we're going to end up with the bottom of this dip somewhere in here rather than where it is. And I think, I don't suppose it's the end of the world, but I just feel that that's quite dramatic, the way that curves round, and I wanted to keep that. So I think I want to change this surface, and of course we've got lots of stuff hanging off it. Yeah, I mean, I'm always coming across these situations where I've done it one way and then have second thoughts about it later on, and I think, well, I can either do the change or I could just carry on and make these surfaces offset from there and just see what happens. But once I've seen something like that, I'm always, unless if I'm really pushed for time, I might just say, oh, I'll just live with it and we'll do whatever, you know, it'll do whatever it does in here. But I feel that I want to change that, unfortunately. But having got all of this structure in place, it's not the end of the world if we have to change it. And it's something that, you know, like I say, I come across time and time again where I look at something again and I think I'm not quite happy with that. So I'm going to do a little change on that. So first of all, let's just take all of the CVs off. One of the things we've got in here, well, obviously this fillet we created using the fillet function. If I go and pick that surface or one of those surfaces, and then I went into the fillet function again, it says this, gives us this message. It says found surface fillet metadata on picked object, load stored options. And what that means is that when I created those fillets, I've got this ticked on, and this is worth ticking on in all your menus. Put create metadata on, because what it does is it saves, although it's not saved any history, it's actually saved the settings that we used, and so I can use that again. So if I'm not going to do that now, but when it comes to changing this surface, I can delete those fillets and recreate them using the metadata from the previous fillet. So it's not history. So if I go query edit on that, it won't do it. If I'm pressing Q for query edit, or we should go into here really, press Q, query edit, there's no history there, but because the metadata has been saved, or the parameters of that fillet have been saved, then we can get that back. So let's start off with this surface here, because this is the one that's more critical. This one sort of starts to do the right thing, but I'm planning to align this back into here. This was a manual blend in here, so I think what we can do there is just get away with realigning it to the side surface once we've done it. So I'm going to untrim that. So I'm just using, occasionally I'm using hotkeys, and if you're not sure what I've just done, just shout, but I'm just using hotkeys because it's a lot quicker, obviously. So just U for untrim in my case. So it's that wherever it is, untrim in there. So I've got that on U as a hotkey. Now this surface here, the only reason we had that as degree 3 going across there was just to get the alignment, and well, we can keep that as degree 3. It doesn't make any difference, to be honest. So what I want to do is I want to sort of rotate this surface. I want to keep this edge where it is, and I want to rotate this surface inwards so that it's a bit more of a halfway house between this angle and this angle. So it's going to be quite different. Now there's a number of different ways we can do this. One way that we can do this, if we go into Surface Edit, or Surface rather, this worked in previous versions, and unfortunately it doesn't work in this version, but I'll show you anyway. So what I can do there is put in a MS Draft normal to that surface, and we can make that whatever length we like. Let's make it 100, for example. I don't need the CVs on it, and we don't want history on it, so we haven't got history on it. You notice in this menu as well, I've got create metadata, so I think I've switched that on in every menu, just in case you ever need to go back and find out what the parameters were of that particular surface. So I've created this draft surface, which is just at 90 degrees to the surface that I want to change. Now, if I go into Align, so let's go so we've got the CVs on here. We'll go into Object Edit and Align, and I want to align this surface to that MS Draft surface, which obviously doesn't do anything at the minute. And as I'll explain, unfortunately, this doesn't actually work, but I'm going to show you anyway. So we've got blending on, I've got extra rows on, so those 2 rows are affected, and I've got create history on. Now this is where it doesn't work. So we've got history on there. If I was to extend that draft surface this way, then what should happen, but doesn't, is that this surface will bend or sort of rotate around this end when I do that. Unfortunately, 2025, it doesn't work at the minute. 2024, I've checked this. I think I've got it set up here. So this is 2024, and this does work. So I'll just show you the idea. So if I pull that surface around, you'll see that surface that I've aligned to it updates with history on it, and that's what should happen. And unfortunately in 25 it doesn't do that. So a way around that is to, if I go into surface there and put those CVs on. Yeah, so another way that we can do this is if I go into the transform CV menu, we can so I've put the CVs on this draft surface now. It just is a bit more difficult to see, but if I use slide and I use edge loop, I can go and pick that. So I want to pick the draft surface there and then just pull that down that way. So that does exactly the same thing. So that's another way of doing it. And so you can see this surface here, the connecting surface, is updating as I do that. There is another way of doing this, and that's to use, let me just save that. Second. So the first method is the one that I usually go to, but unfortunately in this version it's not working. But if I delete that, the other way you can do this is if you go into the transform CV function here and you put on single point, you go normal, and then you use PMod or proportional modification. Now if I do that, you can see we've got these arrows in all directions saying that there's no influence that way. So if I just pulled that point, you just see one point move, but I want to move those points in that direction. So if I now pull that midpoint, you can see those are proportional in a nice way, very similar to the blend in when we were using a line just now. But the other thing you can do is I can say that I want to move those points and these points. Now if I just do the default, it does that, which isn't what I want. That just gives me a lump in the middle, which is not what I want. But I can set all of these in this direction, which is the U direction. And I can never remember which way around this is, but first of all, we want to make sure that that's not locked. So if it's locked, then these parameters here will be the same in both directions, which isn't what we want. But if we set the U direction to 0, and then do that, I've got it right for a change. So you can see it's doing a very similar thing to setting up that MS Draft surface. I don't tend to go for this one. I feel there's a bit more setting up involved, and you have to remember that that's 0, and you've got to determine which is the U and V direction. So I do prefer the other one. So I'm going to just go back to that one I just saved. So this is how I prefer to do it. I use that MS Draft surface. Now the other thing we can do, because we've got the history on, so I've pulled that so that the section there is sort of roughly parallel to this area here. One thing that I should have a look at, so if we just pick all of the mesh, and I just want to get an idea of how far away that point is to this line. So we can do this multiple ways, but and each section is going to be slightly different, so it doesn't really matter too much. If I just put a straight line between there and there, just roughly at 90 degrees, and we'll do another one up here, say. So they're all going to be different lengths, I know that, but just gives us an idea of the sort of size that we're looking for. And then if we go and pick those curves and that one, and then if we go into the information window, actually I'm going to just pick one of those. If I pick one of them, you see it's got all of these things open. If I go transform information and close that down, curve information, that's what I'm after, and I'm after the length, which is 17 on that one. And if we add the other ones in, you'll see that the bits that are open, the tabs that are open here, are the same for each of them. When I just picked the whole lot, it's got tabs I don't want open. So that one's quite different. That says 26, that one says 18, and this one says 17. So I'm looking at these distances here. That's the length of those curves. So I think I'm just going to go and opt for 18. I know that's 26, that's way outside, and but that one does look substantially more, so we just go with that. Then I can delete those curves, don't need those. So we'll say it's 18. I mean, you can also do it by just picking that surface, and we can then offset. So we can go into whichever one it is. Here we go, surfaces, surface offset. So I've got 18 in there because I was trying this out the other night, and we want history on here, so that when we modify the underlying surface, we can this will update. So the things in this menu when you're doing a surface offset, not that it matters, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate here, but you notice over here it says maximum 0.003, and that's because we've got show deviation on here. So that's important to have that on, because you'll find that different settings here do different things. So CV offset just means it takes the CVs from the original and offsets them. Just it goes at 90 degrees and make sure that those are consistent with the original. That's often the best thing to do because you get the same sort of pattern of CVs, which is good. The other one is original, which is doing pretty much the same thing. It's now saying that the maximum distance is 121 millimeters, and I know that's total rubbish. I don't know where it's getting that number from because that's not right. But usually that's a sensible number, and I usually find I can look at that one or original and see which one's giving me the lowest maximum distance, and I usually go for that unless the CVs have gone a bit crazy. Automatic will give you completely different CVs. It should give you a more accurate result, in this case 0.001, but usually I don't want to do that because I'd rather keep the pattern of CVs as the original. And explicit is where you can actually specify the settings. Again, it's saying it's 120, so that's total rubbish. I know that's not right, so I'm just going to go with CV offset. That's accurate enough, and we're not that interested in exactly what that looks like. It's just to give us an idea. Now I'm not seeing any sections on there, so I need to go back into the cross-section editor and just having gone into the editor, it's woken that up again. But if not, you can just go all objects and do it again. So we can now see, maybe we've got the blue section, which is on our original surface, the green section, which is on the offset. And so this offset distance is where I want this point to be. And you can see the substantial differences here at the moment. So I think what we need to do is try and get these sections. I want them to sort of touch the brown section there, which is through the mesh data. So if I go into, normally I'd go into, like I say, the extend. That's what I normally do on the MS draft. So I'm having to think here what I'm doing. So I want to slide point. I don't want proportional modification on. I just want to move. So I want to move a hull on the edge of that MS draft and slide it. So that one there. I'm going to slide that up. So I'm looking in this area for the green sections, which is the offset surface, to just sort of touch the brown mesh section there. And this is an 18mm offset. And then down here, it's substantially different. Well, actually, it's not too different. It's just on this point here, it's starting to peel away from where we want it to be. So it does look as though on this end of this surface, we're going to have to do something different. So I'm not sure whether what I'm doing with the MS draft surface will be enough to get this change in. It's where it starts curving around. So maybe, yeah, no, I don't want to change. I don't want to change these surfaces here. I'm going to go back into here and maybe use CV slide, and I could try proportional modification actually on this. So I don't want that. I want to set this. I'll lock the two of these together, and they should both be 1, which is the default. And I want to just pick that one there. And I just want to affect some of these points in this direction. So I'm doing this now on the draft surface, not the original surface. So I'm looking at these sections here. So maybe if we take that back a bit. So in other words, I'm influencing fewer points, maybe even that just the 2 end points. Let's see what happens there. So that's reasonably close. So you can see when you're shaded up, the offset surface is just poking through the mesh, and everything's going to change anyway from the mesh, in fact, because we're going to chop the end of this off and make this more regular in terms of what's going on here. So let's go with that. I'm just going to get rid of that MS draft surface here, so we don't need that. I'll also get rid of this offset surface for the time being, just because it's really difficult to see what's going on. So I think this is a little bit more consistent now with the sort of yellow section there. Let's save this. But what we're going to do as well, of course, is make sure that everything joins up, because now I've changed this surface, I've got to change this one, and also got to change this one. So let's untrim that one. Now, one of the things we've got here, this is a different length to that surface there. And so we should make them the same length. So the easiest thing to do is just to extend that. Whoa. Didn't really want to do that. I suspect that what's happened there, maybe if I go and look at my default shelf, because I know this is where I've got this extend. So if you look on this default shelf that I've got, that's where my hotkey is defined. Maybe I've changed that setting there. No, I haven't. No, I thought I might have put in a silly percentage or something. It's just suddenly gone crazy. Let's try that again then. So if I just extend that, or maybe it's just, maybe extend is just not wanting to work. Have we got any history on there? No. That's very annoying. So extrapolate merge distance. What? Yeah, that's just what was left in there. Now that's gone completely mad. It just doesn't want to do it. As I was trying to extend it, it's not doing it. Very strange. I think what I'm going to have to do is save this model and then go back to 2024, because I don't know whether it's that or whether it's something that it doesn't like about that particular surface. So let's go back into 2024, which is that one there. Let's try that again. So that's extend. That's what it should be doing. Yeah. So it's either that particular surface there's something it doesn't like, or it's 2025 that's causing the problem there. So I'm extending it, and what I'm trying to do is make it the same length as this one. So if we do extend and then I press Control Alt, so I pick on that edge, you can see it's sort of, it seems to be relating to that edge somehow. But if I go all the way along to the end there, it will actually effectively snap it to the same position. So now let's have a look at the CVs on this. We always want to have the CVs on whenever we're doing any changes. This is usually a bad idea. If I try and align a big surface, big simple surface to a small surface, because the small surface may have a defect in the end, might have just the tiniest of movements of that CV there, for example, would throw the tangency out on this one. I'm going to try it anyway, because we do need to join these up, but it might be a case of aligning that just in G0. So let's and then aligning this in G2 that way, maybe, or some such thing. So I'm going to put no blending on. I just want to do, I'll do G2 to start with and just see what we get. I won't put history on. And just go like that. Now that will have thrown this out a long, long way because I've put G2 on. If I look at the proxy display, which is difficult to see, I must admit, but there's my original CV there, and it's gone way out there. Doesn't surprise me at all, because it's like a big lever, really. The smallest defect in these CVs is going to have a big impact on these CVs here. So let's drop that down to G1. Again, these points here, which are being affected by the tangency of this end condition, are being thrown out a long way. So let's take it down to G0. Now, if I look at the proxy display there, the only thing that's going to be affected is this end. I'm just going to undo that, actually. Let's revert. It's actually moving it quite a long way in this area as well, not surprisingly. So, because again, there's a big gap here, so moving this point in may not be such a great idea. Maybe what I should look at, no, I think what I'm going to do is just align that in position here. So it's moved that section in quite a long way, too far really. And that's just positioned. Let's just see what it says when I do that. So there's so I've changed the continuity to G2 just to see what the difference is. So it says 1.72 degrees. That's just the tendency condition there. So let's revert that again. Probably what I want to do then is, rather than doing it that way, let's just align. This is the normal way of doing things, is to do it that way, but of course this is going to change this surface. So I've got my proxy lines on, which is substantially different to what I wanted, but maybe that's where we want to be. Maybe what I should do then is to, let's put blend on. I will put create history on now. So I'm going to put blend on, because this will have just thrown the end points out but not actually affected these. So I'm sort of going backwards a bit here. So let's put extra rows on, maybe that number of rows. So it takes us all the way down to here. And we will then modify this surface. Now when I tried to align this surface to here, it was throwing us out here. And one of the reasons is because that's a really low degree for such a curved surface. So if we increase the degree, then it gives us more opportunity to localize the change in this area. So I'm going to increase the degree by, well, to 6, just to see what happens. So I want to change this surface here. Let's do this by a single point. I'm going to use proportional modification, and I'll do it normal. So I'm going to modify the big surface, this one. You see this section here is very close to that one, which is not what I really wanted. So I'm going to use proportional modification. I just want to modify that one. I don't want to modify these ones, because I'm hoping that I can keep this more or less where it is. So let's just move that in that direction the other way. And if you look up here, it's not changing that very much, because I've increased the degree here. I think what I should do is put on the offset surface again. Yeah. Hang on. Of course, I've got because I'm in a different version now. So I want 18, I want create history on, and I want the sections on as well. I know this is it's difficult to see what's going on here, but oh, that's exactly what I want. So that section's hitting that. The white section there is actually hitting the brown section, which is the mesh, which is what I was after. So if we shade that up, you can't actually see it poking through the mesh except here, but that's the sort of thing I was after, trying to get that consistency in this area. As we go forward, that gap opens up, so that's fine, because it's just here. It needs to be a bit more consistent, I think, to get us into this shape. So I'm looking at these sections here. These gradually open up. That's okay, because it's progressive towards the front. Let's get rid of that. That's the offset surface. And then the other bit that we want to, so this is now aligned. Obviously, none of these blends are aligned at the minute. And then the other bit we want to change is this one here. And so this one, we should be able to just align that into there with a bit of blend on, and hopefully get a result that way. So object, edit, align. The fact that these are different lengths doesn't matter. We just put partial on. I've got blending on. I don't know how much blending we'll need, but go to there and here. And yeah, it does look really, although we're digging way into the data here, so we're not actually going to, eventually we're going to trim all of this out. So although that looks a bit weird, it sort of curves back on itself. It's probably not too important, because we're going to trim it back here, and by the time we trim it back here, it won't be looking quite so weird. Take create history off. Obviously we're not aligned at the minute. Now we've got position influence of 1, which should give us the most accurate result. Although sometimes you do find that by changing it slightly, you can get a better result, which is always strange, but that's the way it is. It's not quite within the tolerance that we want. Admittedly, our tolerances are very, very tight. And so I think because it's just a corner, I'm just going to increase the degree to 4. There's no problem in doing that. And I think I won't fuss about this end. I keep looking at it thinking I should do something about it, but like I say, if I extend that back, now look at that end. Already it's looking less essy. It still looks a bit essy, doesn't it? Maybe I should do something about it. Just got to stop somewhere. No, I think I'm just going to leave that. Otherwise, we'll be here until Christmas. Right, let me just save this. So we've got all of this aligned in here. We now need to bring these fillets back to alignment. So let's just take the sections off just so that it's a little bit clearer. Now, like I said before, we can reproduce that fillet using the same parameters as we had before. First of all, I want to just isolate those. Got loads of curves on surfaces there, which I want to get rid of, because otherwise we're going to end up with problems when we come to trim. Let's just do a little check on this. So I can go into, I just want to check what the distance is between there, just make sure that I've not done anything really crazy. So I can just check the distance curve to surface. It's substantially different there, 5 millimeters, but it's only 0.3 there. So that's okay. So let's put those on. We'll start with this fillet. So if we go into that fillet and we want to, like I said, if we go into the surface, into the fillet function, it'll say found surface fillet metadata on picked object, load stored options, yes please. So in other words, it's using the same setup here. I don't believe that's for 1 minute. That doesn't look right. It says it's 150 millimeters. I don't think that's right. I wonder whether it's because I've taken it from one version to the next. If that's the case, I can't read that. It's probably got min and max over the top of each other. So let's put min on. So it says 78 mil there. That's the caudal distance. So I think because I've gone back a version, it's probably lost the metadata, or not actually giving me what I thought it would be giving me. So I'm going to just, what I'll do is I'll take those away. I can see I measured the caudal distance anyway. I'm going to just make that into a template so I can see it, but it doesn't get in the way. And then I'm going to delete all of those locators. This one here, we need to untrim and get rid of that curve on surface. In fact, there's 4 of them, because one for each of those surfaces, one for each of those fillet surfaces, and then we'll reproduce that fillet. So let me go into fillet, and it'll be G2. So we just put something in, see what we get first. I've got edge align on. Doesn't actually matter if the parameters aren't the same. No, they are actually. That is working out. So it has used the same parameters by the looks of things. Okay, so let's put in our continuity check. So everything checks out, which is good. That's actually better than we had before. It's slightly bigger than we had, but it doesn't really matter. Don't think it matters too much. Edge align means that these points join up here and here, and this is smoothly blending through here, which is what we want. So we'll go with that one. I'll take create history off. Don't want that on. I've still got create metadata on. That's important. And then I can go and pick the templates. Just get rid of those. We don't want those. They were just there for visual reference. And then we want to get this blend surface in here. I call it a blend surface. It's not from a blend function, but now you can see that's quite different there, just because of the way these two surfaces intersect. But I'm going to just align that into the ends of the fillet. So we do G2, we don't want partial, we want blending, we want position influence of 1, so that the CVs on the end of that surface join up with here. And I've got a bit of blend on, so it's progressing into this end. We don't want too much blend on because it starts to interfere with the G2 into the other surface there. Don't want proxy display on, that's just not necessary here. The proxy display is just showing us the previous version. Now notice that this needs untrimming. So let's have a look at that. Don't need any of these curves on surface. So it's just very good practice to delete those whenever you can. Otherwise you end up with curves on surface which you don't want. And then we'll do an alignment of this one. So I'm aligning this into here, project, normal. Hopefully this should be, hopefully it should be straightforward. I shouldn't say that because it probably won't be. Position influence ought to be 0, which means that it keeps the original CVs pretty much where they are. Seem to have lost the evaluation continuity there. So let's put G2 on there. Just make sure. We'll put G2 on there just to see whether that's correct, whether that's okay. This one should be okay. I've got rid of the curve on surface, but we're just going to because we don't actually need to align that. We can just go into surface edit, project. We should find, if I'm correct, that if we pick that surface, this one, and project a curve on surface on there, and then evaluate, it should be still G2. Hooray. Because we haven't changed that surface or that edge, so that should be fine. This one obviously needs to be aligned, which will break the curve on surface, the continuity there, of course, temporarily. So we do a project onto there. We don't want blending on. So that's now curvature aligned here. Position influence of 0 again, so that the CVs don't move backwards and forwards. That end's fine. This is broken because we've just aligned one but not the other. So now if I do that again, it's still broken there. But this is just the nature of things. So on this end here, we want edge, not project. Otherwise we end up with a curve on surface where we don't want one. And I'll try aligning that one into this end, because this has got the CVs closer to the edge, and usually that's the way to do it. Now, if that doesn't work, let's try G1. It's broken the angle there. That says 0.06, so that's very small. We're only G1, but if I change this to G2, sometimes, and we're lucky here, it's given us G2, even though we didn't ask for it, but that's because we were so close. This edge here, what we'll try and do, we've got the curve on surface already, so rather than using project, I'm just going to see if we go and, so it's an angle mismatch that we've got a problem with here. So I'm just going to use G1 edge, position influence of 0, so it doesn't move the CVs too much, and do that. So that's sorted out the tangency. Now, has that sorted out the curvature? Yes, it has. Yeah. So again, because we were so close, we just needed to tweak that angle there. So now I'm going to trim these back. So I'm using hotkey T in my case for trimming. And finally, we've got back to a modified surface. So, I mean, that did take a bit of time, of course, but we've done quite a big change down that side. And I'm hoping that that's going to be a better, that's going to then build a better surface when we come to this bit. Otherwise, you know, if you leave it later on, then you'll have built all of this and find that this is quite different to how the mesh looks. And then you've got to go back through the whole thing. So it's always better to, when you see something wrong, it's better to try and address it there and then, even though it feels like it's a painful process. It's just better to do it then and there, really. Now, I did say I was going to do the fillet round here, but I'm thinking that I'm not going to do that. I think I need to start moving on these surfaces. We can come back to those fillets because they're small details, and it's better to get the big picture in place. Because obviously, if I find that there's still a problem here, then I'm going to have to revisit that, which I hope I don't have to. But I'm not entirely happy with the shape of that, I have to say. But I think we just leave that for the time being and start to move onto the main body surfaces now. Because it's the joining up of the two that's going to be interesting. So it doesn't matter where we start, really. You did used to get stuck sometimes because I'd be thinking, well, I could start here, or maybe I could start here, or maybe I could start here, or maybe I could start on the wheel arch, and then you end up wasting so much time, and it's still, you know, still find that I do that sometimes, but the main thing is to just move on and get something else done. So first of all, let's get this. Make sure that these are, so I just switch that layer off. I just want to make sure everything's on the right layer. So I'm just going to, by switching the layer off, you can clearly see the bits that are missing. So I can switch that, put that back into the right layer there. And it's worth doing, although we've got these, this continuity shown here. If I just go and delete all of the locators, it's just worth doing this check mod every so often. So this is where we check the overall continuity of everything. So once again, in this version, it seems to be not actually having the right values in there. So those values should be from the construction options. So we've got these construction options in here, 0.001 and 0.05. For some reason that's not updated in there, which it should do. If I click on custom tolerances and switch it off, it comes back on. So yeah, a bit of a glitch, but that's what we want. If in doubt, you can always say use custom tolerances and then set them. But if I switch that off or switch that on and then switch it off, you can see it's actually got the right tolerances in there. So you must make sure that that's the case. And then we'll just say report all, and I say check. And that'll tell us if there's any continuity issues, which there doesn't look like there are. Bah. I've actually switched all of those off, haven't I? So I need to switch them on and then do the check again. So it's weirdly saying there is a continuity error there. Obviously, there's position mismatches here. That's just where we've got hard edge there. That doesn't really matter. This one, I hadn't noticed that one. So it was worth putting that check on. If you do this as you're going along, this check mod, then you should end up at the very end of your model having to do the minimum amount of checking. And it's much better to do it as you go along rather than waiting till the last minute, because once you get to the last minute and you're trying to finish the model off and you find you've got hundreds of error messages, that's never good. So this is another one where I'm just wondering, I can't remember whether that was I think it was just continuity of curvature, wasn't it? So in this case, this is not going to work. If I do G1, we're never going to get that G2 there. So I have to put G2 on. It does destroy the match there, but it says a gap of 0.001. Now we could probably increase the degree going this way and do it, because it then more localizes the change. Or the other thing you could try, if you really wanted to reduce the number of CVs or the degree in that direction, you could try doing this and then aligning that just in position to that edge. I'm not going to bother to do that because that worked, and degree 6 is neither here nor there, so I'm going to ignore all of this because this is sharp edges, and we can, like I say, we'll do that later. I think it's much more important to get these major surfaces in now and move on a bit. So that's our top, and so we want to now start working on this surface. I'm going to start working on this area because that's the one that worries me the most in terms of getting the relationship of these two together. So I'm going to create a new layer called body upper, I'll call it, which is what we had. I think I've got caps lock on, so I'm sort of unconsciously really putting these in capital letters because it's a bit easier to see them, and they're the most important things. So let me just I'll make that a different color. Let's make it a bit more subdued, and we'll make that the blue color there. And then we'll take this surface and we're going to offset that by 18 mil. So I'm going to use, now you see in here we can see that's the maximum 0.036. Not that it's particularly important here. If I make it CV offset, you get 0.011. That's not a rule. There is no rule that says that's going to be better than that in terms of the deviation. They pretty much give you the same result. The only thing you notice that CV offset is taking the untrimmed version, original is taking the trimmed version. Now if I take trim off and create curve on surface off, then we should get the same result. You can see the CVs change slightly. I can't say which is particularly better, but usually CV offset will be closer to the original. Because it's an offset, we start to get some lumps and bumps in that surface a little bit. It's probably that the original surface isn't perfect, that there's probably more refinement I could have done, but I'm not going to worry about it. We're trying to build a concept here, not an A-class surface anyway. So we're 0.011, doesn't matter, but that's slightly different. And if we take that surface, so this is going to start to form this yellow surface here. Now, if you remember, we did have, so I'll just untrim that. We did have a construction surface that we built for this top edge. So I'm going to bring that back in if I can find it. So there's our construction surface. I'll put it under con. So con glass house, in fact. And I might make that red. It's very clear then that that's a construction surface. And that was to try and get this top surface of the top peak of that green surface there. Now our offset surface, let's remove top, and we'll put our sections on. So this offset surface, although it's quite different to the data, is supposed to be defining this bit where the data is, but we've got a slightly different angle just so it's a perfect offset of the glass house. So where that intersects the construction surface, that's where we want our top surface to be, or the top of that edge to be. So to make things simple, and this will also clean up this just automatically, if I convert this back to these surfaces here, then that's what we want in this area. Now the only reason, like I said before, is that we've got degree 3 here is because we wanted, because the original surface had degree 3 just to get the alignment, but actually the difference between that and degree 2 is going to be very small, and the simpler we keep this, the better, to be honest. So I'm going to just reduce that down to 2, So it won't be a perfect offset anymore, but it doesn't matter. And then I want to trim convert this back to these surfaces here. If I try and trim convert it back to those two surfaces, we will end up with probably a rather bad result. So let's just try that anyway. So if I say trim convert here, trim convert intersect. So I want to trim that, and we'll do that and that. And you can see we've got green dots there, which means it will trim it. But what does it do? It's actually not too bad. But really, we want to, because this is our construction, we ought to split it into two at that point to make it accurate. If I say show edge deviations, that's not too bad at all. It's only 0.02. So maybe we'll just live with that. We might have to split it at this point just to make it consistent with the construction. Let's just see how we go with that. So let's take this off. And we'll put our sections back on. So that's what we're going to have. I've got this green line in there as well, which we did have, and that was for the inner edge, wasn't it? So, but we're looking at the outer edge, in fact, here. So that green line is no longer relevant, but we'll keep it there as just as a guide, maybe, to what we're going to be doing. We're going to have to change this shape quite a bit from what we had, because we've got a surface there that's quite different. I'm not sure how this is going to work out, to be honest. Now coming forward here, again, this section's coming back off itself. So I want this to be an offset of that side of the glass here. So let's go into top there. So once more, we'll do another offset there. So again, 18 mil. Now I think that's gone inboard rather than outboard. And the reason is because the normals of these surfaces aren't the same way. So I'll make it -18 to give us the right, make it go in the right direction. And we'll take that top bit off, and we're bringing that construction surface again. I know this is a bit difficult to see what's going on here. With cross sections, of course, we've got that in that menu as well up there, which is probably an easier place to put it on. So this is our offset surface that we're going to use as a basis of the green surface. Again, we need to trim convert it to these construction surfaces to give us that sort of shape. This one definitely, because we're trying to intersect this with these two surfaces, that's just not going to do it in one operation. If I try to trim convert that to there, we're going to get a really weird top edge to it. This is a bit short as well. This needs to come down a bit, so I'm just going to extend that. Just ignore that. So if I do an intersect here between that and the top surface, hopefully this will become clearer what I'm doing here. I'm trying to find the intersect between that and that. So once we've built this, it'll hopefully become a bit clearer. So I've got this curve on surface now, which is the intersect between those two. And the reason I've put that in is so that we can then detach this surface into two at that point. So let's go into Object Edit, and we're going to do a detach. And we're going to go from here. So again, it's saying this history. That's because I must have had history on the curve on surface there. So if I do click on this curve on surface here, will that work? I'm not sure it does. Let's just get rid of that. So I'm going to delete the history on there, because it keeps on asking me and I don't want it to do that. So I think maybe it won't let me do it. No. So sometimes you find that you're trying to do something like detach or whatever to a particular point, and you can't find a way of getting it to pick that point. If that's the case, what you can do is if you go into construction point, you'll find that this will attach to anything. Well, yeah, I don't want it attaching to there. Get the mesh out of the way. So I just want it to attach to that point there. So now I'm pressing Control and click, and it works. Whereas detach wouldn't let me pick that. And so that's what you have to sometimes find, that you've got to put a point on these in these areas. And then when I do a detach, hopefully this time, if I do Control, which is what I was trying to do before on the end, it's now picking up the point. Press the space bar and we get the two surfaces. So this one's got a curve on surface, and so we can do a trim convert on this. That's quite a complicated shape, so the trim convert's probably not going to be that accurate, but it'll be reasonable. And you know, this edge is, although we've put construction surfaces in, we're not necessarily going to keep exactly to those construction surfaces. As long as it's roughly there, we're okay. So I've taken off 3D trimming because I've got a curve on surface already, and I'm just going to trim that out. You can see that gives us a really not a very good result. In fact, it says the maximum distance there is 1 mil. We could increase the degree to 7 and put auto update. For some reason it's not switched on, so I want auto update on. Again, it's a very poor result there. We don't really want it looking like that. What I might be able to do is just modify that top edge. I'm just going to make that, I'm going to keep that as degree 6, to be honest, because I'm going to modify that. So I'm going to sort of ignore the construction surfaces, or I might actually build some new construction surfaces if we need to, but I think they've served their purpose and it's got us roughly there. Sometimes with construction surfaces you want to keep 100% of them. In this case it's been useful. It's got us so far, but it's sort of probably that's the end of its usefulness. This bit here, I'm not even sure whether we need that trim converted. I don't know quite how that's going to work out. I'm going to do a trim convert here. I'm just going to do it anyway. So this time I'm doing 3D trimming with intersect. And now this is one of the things about this is that when you use this sort of intersect and project inside this menu, it's great. But sometimes you find that other surfaces get in the way when you're trying to pick the surface that you want to trim. If I just rotate that around there, I can just go and pick on the bit that I want and do it that way. But if you do find it's a problem, then just go into this intersect or project, create the curves on surface first, and then you should be fine. So that's a nice clean edge, but whether we actually need that surface, I'm not entirely sure. We'll find out, but I just thought I'd just trim it anyway. This one's definitely needs some TLC on that one. So let's squash that up. Now I know I've got these curves in. I should get rid of those curves out of this view just for the time being. Or maybe I'll keep them in because it's useful to see, I suppose, in relation. This edge, like I say, is pretty rubbish. So I want to tidy that up. Now I could do that. There was 2 ways I could do it. I could either put a curve on that edge, tidy up the curve, then do an align with blend on, or we can go into the transform CV function. I just use move single point with proportional modification. So when I do this point here, I want this point to move as well. So I can do that and then I can just move that up and down in Z. So I'm just trying to get the same sort of shape, but a better set of CVs, because we don't want CVs that go up and down like that. Now I'm having to move that a long way. So what we then have to do is move this point. You'll notice that point is also affected. So it's not going to be perfect, but it just sort of roughly gets those points to where we want. And then that one could come down a bit actually. And then that one up a bit. What I'm looking at is this top edge of CVs that we don't want. We don't want that one above these two, because that's sort of indicating that it's going the wrong way. Doesn't mean that you have an inflection in the surface. It just means that it looks bad. It just looks as though from the CVs you're not quite sure whether there's an inflection or not. Whereas if they're very flat or they go one way, then we know that that curve can only go one way. This point also could come down a little bit. I mean, I don't know why I'm comparing with the curve, because it's really the mesh I want to look at. This middle point here looks a bit dodgy. You can actually, I can stay in PMod because I've got none of these are being affected, so it's just the same as moving a single point. It just saves me having to go back into the menu just to get that point more in the mid position between those 2 points. That's going to work better. So let's just bring in our mesh again. So I've no idea what this is doing compared with the mesh. I'm going to take proportional scaling off. So it looks to me as though we're quite a long way off where we should be. Don't know what's going on really. Yeah, so this surface, like I said, was a waste of time, but I just thought I'd do a trim convert on it. In fact, I've got that. I've messed up there, I think, because no, what it is, it starts off as 18 mil offset, and then here it's going to have to come out, but it also the angle changes. So I don't think that was at all useful, to be honest. That surface. So this one's okay. This one starts to peel away. I think this one I might just throw it away. I don't know why I've even got it in there. Yeah, I'm just going to put that. I'll just chuck that in the bin. Don't need that one. And then this one needs to be pulled out substantially, because at the moment it sort of almost looks like it's joining up to this point, which is not the plan. It needs to come to this point here. CVs are all over the place. That doesn't matter, we can tidy that up. At this end it's just touching where I wanted it to touch. So let's just keep this as simple as possible. We don't need any crown on it, so we can actually get rid of that. For the time being, we just make it completely flat. We can add the crown later, and it just means it's much simpler to work with. So I'm going to again use this proportional modification here. I'm going to pull that point and just make these move as well up to about there, and then I'm just going to move that in the Y direction. And I'm just trying to get that. I'm also going to move in the Z direction, just trying to get it a bit closer to this section here. This one here, again, we need to pull that out a bit. So I'm way above the data here. So so I think it's going to be time to just forget the proportional modification, just move single points. So it's really what I'm after is trying to get this started off at the sort of right place, roughly here, and then we can worry about how this feeds into the blended area there. So it's just getting that initial tangency going in the right direction, and I'm not going to worry too much about the CVs. Obviously I'm sort of got half an eye on the CVs, but I'm just trying to get it to touch that section there at the start. And when it comes around here, we know that this is going to deviate from this section because we've deliberately made this our surface section more like this surface section. So it will come and go in terms of the shading there, but it gives us something to start with. And I think I shall carry on working around here, but I'm also going to start working on the bonnet so that we can join that whole area up, so at least get that tangency in, so it's consistent around that whole area, which is pretty complicated.